They were told they didn't belong. They were told they weren't strong enough, smart enough, or brave enough to wear the uniform. They were called every name designed to break a man's spirit before he ever set foot on a battlefield. But in the spring of 1943, a group of black men walked through the gates of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, into a military force that had never wanted them. A force that had spent nearly 2 centuries keeping them out. They were the first black Marines in United States history, and they were about to rewrite everything the Corps thought it knew about courage, excellence, and what it meant to be a warrior. The United States Marine Corps had a reputation: elite, feared, the tip of America's spear. But it also had a policy, unwritten but absolute, that had kept black men out of its ranks since its founding in 1775. While the Army and Navy had begun accepting black soldiers in limited roles, the Marines remained a fortress of exclusion. Their reasoning was brutal and simple. Corps leadership believed that black men lacked the intelligence, discipline, and combat effectiveness necessary for Marine operations. They believed that integration would destroy unit cohesion and weaken the force. They believed, with the certainty of men who had never been challenged, that the Marine Corps was no place for colored troops. But war has a way of forcing change. By 1942, the pressure was mounting. Civil rights leaders were demanding action. President Roosevelt needed manpower. The other branches were already training black units, and the Marines were running out of excuses. On June 25, 1942, the Commandant of the Marine Corps received direct orders from the President: begin recruiting Negro Marines. The announcement was made, the policy was changed, and the Marine Corps, furious and defiant, began preparing for what many officers considered a disastrous experiment. The first recruits arrived at Montford Point, a segregated training facility carved out of the swamps adjacent to Camp Lejeune. It was deliberately isolated, deliberately harsh, a place where the Corps could hide these new recruits away from the white Marines they didn't want them associating with. The conditions were primitive. The heat was suffocating. The insects were relentless. The barracks were hastily built, and the drill instructors, almost all white men, arrived with something to prove. Some came determined to train these men properly. Others came determined to break them, to prove that the Corps had been right all along. The insults started immediately, on the training field, in the mess hall, at every moment of every day. They were told they didn't belong. They were called boys when they were men. They were called worse when officers weren't listening. They were given the hardest duties, the longest marches, the most degrading assignments. But something unexpected happened. The men didn't break. They didn't quit. They absorbed every insult, endured every injustice, and kept moving forward. They woke before dawn and trained until they collapsed. They memorized every manual, mastered every weapon, and pushed themselves beyond exhaustion. They understood that they weren't just training to become Marines. They were training to prove something larger than themselves. Every perfect formation, every completed obstacle course, every qualification earned was a refutation of every lie told about their people. They were fighting 2 wars before they ever left American soil, one against the enemies of their nation and one against the prejudice of their countrymen. Among those first recruits were men who would become legends. There was Gilbert Hashmark Johnson, a veteran who had already served in the Army and the Navy, returning once more to prove that black men belonged in every branch. He would become the first black Marine drill instructor, shaping thousands of Marines with his booming voice and unbreakable standards. There was Frederick Branch, a college graduate from North Carolina, who became the first black commissioned officer in Marine Corps history. There were farm boys from Mississippi, factory workers from Detroit, and college students from across the country. Men who had never been given a fair chance in civilian life and were determined to seize this one. In those brutal months, they forged bonds that would last a lifetime. When one man faltered, others carried him. When instructors tried to pit them against each other, they refused to break ranks. They became brothers in a way only those who have survived such a crucible can understand. And slowly, grudgingly, some of the white instructors began to change their minds. They saw these men run faster, shoot straighter, and work harder than any recruits they had ever trained. One instructor, who had opposed integration from the start, pulled aside a black recruit after a grueling day. The recruit braced for another insult. Instead, the instructor said, "You're going to make it, Marine. You're going to make a hell of a Marine." By the end of 1943, the first Montford Point graduates earned their Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. They had met the same standards, passed the same tests, and earned the same title, but they still weren't given the same opportunities. The Marine Corps assigned them to support units, ammunition companies, depot companies, and stevedore battalions. The dirty, dangerous, unglamorous work that kept the war machine running. They didn't complain. They knew the game. They would do the jobs no one wanted, and do them better than anyone ever had. Their chance came in the hell of the Pacific: Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Jima. The Black Marines of the ammunition and depot companies hit the beaches under fire, unloading ammunition in waist-deep surf, forming human chains to move crates of explosives while bullets snapped around them. They drove trucks through artillery fire. They rescued wounded men from exposed positions. And when enemy counterattacks threatened their supply lines, they picked up rifles and held the line. White officers who had doubted them now wrote reports praising their courage and efficiency. "The colored Marines," one wrote, "are the reason we're still fighting. They don't quit. They're Marines, same as us." At Peleliu, they set records that still stand. One depot company moved over 2,000 tons of supplies in 24 hours, a rate logistics officers thought was impossible. On Iwo Jima, their relentless work ensured that artillery never once ran out of ammunition, a feat unheard of in the Pacific Campaign. They earned something greater than medals. They earned respect. By war's end, over 19,000 black men had served as Marines. They had proven that courage has no color, that excellence has no race, and that when the bullets start flying, the only thing that matters is the Marine beside you. But when they came home, their country still refused to see them as equals. They couldn't sit at lunch counters in the South. They were denied jobs, housing, and education. The uniform that meant brotherhood overseas meant nothing in Birmingham or Mississippi. Still, something fundamental had changed. The Montford Point Marines had kicked open a door that could never again be fully closed. They had proven that integration didn't weaken the Corps, it strengthened it. Their performance helped pave the way for President Truman's 1948 order desegregating the military, and for generations of black Marines who would rise to lead the Corps itself. In 2012, 70 years later, the surviving Montford Point Marines were finally honored with the Congressional Gold Medal. Old men in dress blues stood tall, some in wheelchairs, their pride undiminished. They had waited decades for their nation to say what they had always known. They were Marines. They had always been Marines. Today, black men and women serve in every rank, every role, every corner of the Marine Corps, from pilots and snipers to generals and drill instructors. Each one walks a path cleared by the men of Montford Point. The story of the Black Marines of World War II isn't just about war. It's about dignity in the face of dehumanization, excellence in the face of doubt, patriotism in the face of prejudice. It's about men who fought for a country that didn't love them back and made that country better through their service. They fought two wars, one against tyranny overseas and one against injustice at home. And through their strength, determination, and excellence, they won both. Their legacy is not just Marine Corps history, it's American history, at its most painful and its most inspiring.